And so if you go to downtown Detroit, it's this beautiful football stadium, this beautiful baseball stadium, this beautiful casino, and then everything else is just depressing. It's just boarded up buildings and everything's run down. And so Detroit, quite frankly, has been crapped on both as a city and in football for pretty much my entire lifetime, specifically in football. And so here are the Lions, the lovable Lions. The quarterback was rejected by the Rams because they didn't think they could win with him. And the coach is a freaking hamburger head who everybody loves because they play hard for him and he cries grown man tears. And they're running roughshod on San Francisco and they've got a big lead. And I'm thinking, good for them. And before halftime, Dan Campbell, with an opportunity to go up by 3 scores, sat there with his headset on, and he thought about it. And they said on the TV broadcast, he kind of likes to go for this. And then he said, put his hands up for field goal. And they ran the field goal team. 17-point lead. Brock Purdy's pants were brown at halftime. Again, 3-possession game. San Francisco gets the ball. They go down the field. They kick it. And then stupidity set in. I could not explain to you how angry I was for the people of Detroit, for everything that they've been through as football fans, the misery that they've been through, really in pro sports in general, ever since the NHL put in a salary cap and the Red Wings couldn't just win every single cup in a row. I mean, it's been miserable there. And so I'm thinking, okay, here you go. Here's your shot. And the moron coach went for it on 4th down. And they didn't get it. And I thought, oh no. Because I'm counting possessions in my head. And at that point, I'm like, San Francisco is 1 play away from winning this game. 1 play. Everything Detroit's been through, you could see it. You could feel it. Just like you could feel the Ravens collapse when Zay Flowers fumbled the ball at the goal line, just like you could feel the confidence in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you could feel the collapse in Detroit. When they're sitting there at the 30-yard line or whatever it is, and it's 4th and short, and Dan Campbell's sitting there, and it's a 14-point game in the second half, and I am like, kick the field goal. And the reason I said kick the field goal is because it is a 2-possession game, which means they are 1 play away from being in it. The momentum is hanging right here. You kick the field goal. It's a 3-possession game. They go to commercial. They come back. You kick it off. You run your defense out there. And everybody in the stadium is looking at Brock Purdy saying, Brock, is there anything you can do for us? And now all the pressure's on them. And instead, they ran a play for Josh Reynolds. And that 1 play happened. Purdy launched the ball down the field. It hit Kendall Vilder in the face mask. Brandon Ayuk made a great play. And at that point, game was over. Then in the 4th quarter, that moron coach, congratulations, your players love you. That moron coach with an opportunity to tie the game. Nope. We're going to go for it. Oh! How bad I felt for the people of Detroit yesterday. And maybe because I see a little bit of Titans in that, but more so just because I know as a football fandom what they've been through. So if I were the Lions, I'd fire Dan Campbell today. There is no room for that stupidity in the NFL. And you are never going to win if you coach as stupid as he did yesterday. And it has got to be called out. There is a difference between being aggressive and being a moron, right? There's a difference between aggressive driving. I'm going to, maybe get over to this left lane right here. I'm going to maybe, try to speed up here to get through this red light. And then there is going 95 and a 15. There is a difference between the two. And I don't care what the analytics say. I don't care what some egghead from Harvard says about, and the way the game was going. You could feel it. You could feel the collapse coming. You could see it. And not only that, everybody praises Dan Campbell for the fact that, those players, they are an extension of him out there on the field. And they were yesterday. Once he crapped his pants, then the running back crapped his pants, then the wide receiver crapped his pants, then the DB crapped his pants, then the special teamer with the ball at the 1 yard line crapped his pants, then Amon-Ra St. Brown crapped his pants. I mean, they were an extension of him yesterday. Dan Campbell seems like a great guy, a real good man. Those players love him. But I think we also have to admit, he's also an idiot. I think we have to admit that. And what kills me about this for Detroit is that this was their one chance. Kansas City's going to be back. They might lose the Super Bowl. I don't think they will, but they might lose the Super Bowl, but Kansas City will be back. The Ravens, will they be back in the AFC Championship game as the number 1 seed? I don't know, maybe. But they'll be back in the playoffs with Lamar Jackson, and San Francisco's there every year. The Lions, this was their shot. They've got an average quarterback. They've got a guru offensive coordinator who is leaving to be a head coach. A trip to the Super Bowl. It was right there. It was in their hands, and the coach blew it. Well, Jared, that's how he's been coaching all year. Guess what? Good. Then he'll never get to the Super Bowl. So what's the point of keeping him around anyways? And down by 3 in the fourth quarter with a chance to tie the game. Nope, we're going for it. What about the previous going for it gave you confidence? And then don't even get me started on running the ball under 2 minutes with 3 timeouts when you have to get it back. You have to get the ball back. You cannot run the football. You'd be better off bringing out your field goal team and then kicking off and using your 3 timeouts and trying to score a touchdown there. Everybody knows that. So if I owned the Lions, I'd fire Dan Campbell. And I wouldn't have any regrets. And the amount of people that last night said, Jared, you can't fire Dan Campbell. He's the one who turned the Lions around. Anybody who says that does not understand the history of sports. Jerry Krause fired Doug Collins after they got the Chicago Bulls to the Eastern Conference Finals. Do you think he regrets promoting Phil Jackson? I don't. Grady Little, in 2003, the Boston Red Sox won 95 games. They were down 0-2 in the division series to the Oakland A's. They came back. They won 3 in a row. And they had the Yankees on the ropes in Game 7. And one bad bullpen decision by leaving Pedro Martinez in the game got Grady Little fired. Only to hire Terry Francona and end the 86-year drought the next year. Detroit Lion fans, you probably don't care about me. And before yesterday, I'm not sure I cared about you. But you deserve better than the arrogance and the incompetence last night. And shame on Greg Olson and shame on everybody else out there in the media trying to finger wag us into this idea that Dan Campbell isn't a complete and total moron after watching the game yesterday. I cannot believe what I saw. And I am still so angry for the people of Detroit. It is so hard to get to a conference championship game. It is so hard if you don't have Peyton Manning as your quarterback. It is so hard if you don't have an incredible roster like the 49ers and a guru coach. This is your one shot. This is your one chance. Like Brian Billick's Ravens had one shot with Trent Dilfer at quarterback, and it worked. You get one chance. And that moron screwed it up by having to go for it, baby! Ah! And I can't tolerate that. You got to fire that guy. Because at the end of the day, there is at least a little bit of brains that are required in coaching. Just a little bit. I know it's amazing. I know it's a great story when the lovable moron gets his team to play hard. I know it's like a Disney movie, like Little Giants, where you just feel so good about him. The reject quarterback, the moron coach that, eats his own boogers. I know it's great. But the problem is that it's not practical for success. At some point, you have to at least use your head a little bit. Just a little bit. And he couldn't do it. And so even talking about this is making me angry now. So they should fire that coach. Because, again, I understand. He had a great season. He screwed up in the game or whatever it may be. But there are consequences for when you mess up in the big game. You miss a field goal and your team loses a regular season game in November at Philadelphia, you'll probably get to keep your job. You miss a game-winning field goal like Tyler Bass did last week for the Buffalo Bills, or a game-tying field goal, you're probably not coming back. The stakes matter. And so I shouldn't care. Detroit, it's a nothing franchise. It's never won anything in my lifetime. Nobody cares about the city of Detroit. Nobody voluntarily goes to the city of Detroit on their own. And yet I can't help but just feel angry for them. Just like they got screwed as a city because of their moronic head coach. Oh, my goodness. It's just, I feel so painful for them. And so I'd fire the coach. And I'd elevate the offensive coordinator, who I think is probably more important to that entire operation anyways. And I'd make him the head coach. And I would go on about my business just like the Chicago Bulls did when they elevated Phil Jackson, and just like the Boston Red Sox did when they hired Terry Francona. And it worked out for them. So I'd give it a try, as opposed to going for it on 4th and 28, which I'm sure Dan Campbell probably wants to do. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in on this. And I got to say something about yesterday's game, of where it really hurts. Where it hurts me, putting myself in their shoes. And score one for Mike Vrabel yesterday, by the way. I'll explain how. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
How much of this collapse are you putting on Dan Campbell and the coaching?
Yeah, very little. Let's be clear, though, this is a disastrous collapse for Detroit. To be up 14-0, to be up 24-7, and to lose in that way, disaster. I put very little on Dan Campbell. Everyone's talking about kicking field goals and whatnot. 4th and 2, they throw the ball to Josh Reynolds. He drops it. Then we come back, and then there's going to be a drop on 3rd down by Josh Reynolds in the 3rd quarter. And then there's the fumble by Gibbs in the 3rd quarter. All led to 17 points. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to those 2 drops. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to that Gibbs fumble.
You got a 24-7 lead at halftime. You do not have an excuse to lose that game and to get blitzed in the 3rd quarter the way that you did. I mean, not only was the game tied, the game was tied by the end of the 3rd quarter. Tied by the end of the 3rd quarter. And ultimately, you ended up scoring 27 unanswered points before you put up something. I'm sorry. I got to look at the coach there, and I got to say, yo, man, this was not your shining moment.
I remember when I was in Denver and being one of the leaders, every time we left the locker room during a playoff game, I would always tell the guys, don't you be the one. Don't you be the one that get a penalty that cost us. Don't you be the one that fumble the football that cost us. Coach, don't you be the one to try to be the smartest man that ever played to coach the game. Take those points.
I mean, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Stephen A. And, of course, Dan Orlovsky, smartest guy in the room, has to back Dan Campbell, the dumbest guy in the room, who is not trying to claim to be the smartest guy in the room, but then did dumbest guy in the room stuff. And now the people who want to be the smartest guy in the room are trying to back the dumbest guy in the room. And, again, here's what kills me for Detroit fans. It is so hard to get where they were. It is so hard to get to the AFC Championship game, to get to the NFC title game, where you've got a lead, where you've really got control of the ball game. It is so hard to get there. And yet, gone. And I love this. It wasn't Dan Campbell that dropped the ball. It wasn't Dan Campbell that fumbled the football. It wasn't Dan Campbell. Then why have a coach? If none of the mistakes that are made by the players are the coach's fault at all, then why have the coach? And at what point is the coach supposed to calm everybody down and not lead to the floodgates opening, which Dan Campbell did yesterday? And what kills me is that performance was so unforgivable yesterday, including running the football under 2 minutes with all 3 timeouts, and so many people are forgiving it today. Like, Jared, he coached like that all year. Well, congratulations. And when he continues to coach like that, you'll continue to not get to the Super Bowl. And I got to give Vrabel credit here. I'm going to do this because one of the things that the Titans have been dragging Mike Vrabel through the mud on in hindsight is this. He was unable to allow analytics to help him out or whatever it may be. Basically, the narrative that Vrabel was anti-analytic. Guess what? Vrabel wouldn't have pissed that lead away yesterday. Vrabel would not have pissed that lead away to Brock Purdy. Wouldn't have done it. Vrabel would have kicked that field goal, gone up by 3 possessions, and at that point, how many possessions are left in the game for San Francisco? 4? So you're up 3 possessions. There's 4 possessions left. All you've got to do is get one more stop or one more score, and you win. That's it. And instead, the coach couldn't help himself. We gotta go for it. And it's like, you know what? Congratulations, moron. That's why you're at home today. And so many people are like, oh, no, it's not the moron coach. It's like part of the reason why you love this guy is because he's a moron. Well, here's the downside of that. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I am so mad about this. And I get even more mad when people are like, oh, no, Jared, this is how he always coaches. Good. Then you'll always lose in the playoffs. Craig is up next. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What's up, Craig?
Hey, guys. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Good. Go.
I'm doing well. Listen, I agree with 90% of what you're saying, except for criticizing the coaching decisions and comparing them to Vrabel's and Tennessee. It sounds
so
a
then
little bitter.
you disagree
to be honest,
with everything I said, because that's all I've said is that, like, the coaching decisions were terrible.
I think I agree with you on that, but I think there was a lot of luck on the other side. The catch off the face mask, stepping out of bounds, some drop passes. Sometimes
That's
it's
not
better
luck.
to be lucky than good.
That's not
That's all
the
I'm saying.
one thing that's luck is the ball that hit Vildor in the face mask that was caught by Ayuk. That was the one lucky thing. And that's the whole point in this. That's the whole point, is that if you make it a two-possession game, if you allow it to be a two-possession game, you are one play away from them being in the game. And that's what drives me bananas about these analytic people, is they don't believe in momentum. They don't believe in clutch. They don't believe in those factors, which are very much a part of sports, right? Like in October, I don't want Derek Jeter coming up to bat with a chance to win the game, because Derek Jeter, unlike everybody else, is probably going to come through with the game on the line. So if you kick the field goal, that one lucky play that San Francisco got doesn't all of a sudden completely shift the game. And that's why that coach is a moron.
I wouldn't call him a moron, but I will say that I think there's only so much coaching you can do during the game, right? Like,
yes, kick
all
the
work
field
you do
goal. Thank you
leading
for
up
your
to
call,
it is
Craig.
what matters, and it's down to the players after that.
Craig,
That's all I'm saying.
this is all coaching. Like, this is all coaching. Like, to say, like, there's only so much the coach can do. Agreed. That's why I don't blame Baltimore's coach for why they lost yesterday. That was mano-a-mano. Mahomes outdueled Lamar, and Zay Flowers fumbled the ball, and that's not the coach's fault. But not kicking the field goal is 100% the coach's fault. And I get all these people that keep saying, like, he's been doing this all year, Jared. He's been doing this all year. He didn't do it in the first half. In the first half, they called timeout on 4th down with like 15 seconds to go. And the offense stood on the field, and they showed him on TV. And he had his headset on, and he was standing there, and you could tell he was thinking. And then all of a sudden, he put 2 arms up in the air to say field goal. And the field goal team ran on the field. And you want to know how I know he was thinking about it before he put his hands up for field goal? Because if he was going to kick the field goal in that instance, they would have gone to the referee and they would have waited until there was 3 seconds, and then they would have called timeout. And so instead, he called timeout because he was thinking about it. And then he realized, you know what? Or somebody over the headset said, nah, we should probably go up 3 possessions going into the second half. Okay, field goal. That's why. So don't give me the coach can only do so much. This coach had a 3-possession lead in his hands, and he decided to risk it. And not only that, the other thing is, what did he risk it for? He risked it for another 3-possession lead. If you score a touchdown, it is still a 3-possession game. It's not like he was choosing between a 4-possession lead and a 3-possession lead. He was choosing between a 3-possession lead and a 3-possession lead. And even if they get the first down, there's no guarantee that you're going to score a touchdown. So what are we talking about here? Like, it's basic. And then you're trying to give me the, oh, no, he dropped the ball. Stop. 615-737-1025, more of your phones. Plus, let's not make yesterday about Brock Purdy, okay? Like, let's not make it about Brock Purdy. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. Some of you have texted into the text line about the AFC game, and I promise we will get to that too. That was a freaking great game on a lot of different levels, but this is all I'm so angry about a game involving 2 teams and 2 coaches that I don't care about. And it's the ignorance or the stupidity of it. I don't know what it is that makes me so mad, but I am mad. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan this Thursday. Vandy's women's basketball team takes on Mississippi at home. Pregame 6:15, tip-off at 6:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app. And on Wednesday, Vandy's men's basketball team is on the road at Auburn. Pregame at 7:30, tip-off at 8. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Third and goal.
Yeah, the problem right now for Ben Johnson is you're on the 1.5-yard line. You'd love to run the ball, but down here with all these bodies, if you get tackled short, by the time they peel everybody off the pile to preserve your 3 timeouts, you'd let a ton of clock run down.
Well, they brought Montgomery in, and maybe they do it anyway.
And if you run it, you got to score. They did not go big people. They got 3 wide receivers on the field.
They give it to Montgomery. He is swarmed.
That's the problem with running it down there, and now they got to take a timeout. So now you've made.
Now they have to kick an onside kick.
Now you have to get the onside kick, or the game's over.
Where's the analytics community on that one? I mean, I played Madden football when I was a kid. Guess what? Everybody knows you need all 3 timeouts after the 2-minute warning. You can survive. If you have to call a timeout in the 3rd quarter to avoid a delay of game, or you get a look on defense that you don't like, and it's like timeout, and you've got to burn that first one, and so you've got 2 timeouts, you have to know, hey, if we got to make this a 1-possession game before the 2-minute warning because we need that 2-minute warning to stop the clock. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. And they ran the freaking ball. I mean, they've got one of the best tight ends in the NFL. They got a running back who's incredible catching the ball out of the backfield. They got a number 1 receiver. And they ran the ball. They ran the ball. So somebody defend that one for me. What analytic formula do we have that defends that one? Somebody give that to me. And I would say the analytics community is really pushing back today. Like, oh no, Jared, the only people that don't like analytics are the people that don't understand analytics. No, I understand analytics. Analytics are, supposedly like a computation of all of these things that have happened in the past. And so it tells you that you are more likely to win the game if you do this. But somebody has to explain to me how we come up with this mathematical formula that says you are more likely to win the game if you get a first down on 4th and 2 that allows you to then take a 2-possession game and try to make it a 3-possession game when you can kick and it makes it a 3-possession game. And not only that, when we think analytics, do you think Dan Campbell? When we think about Harvard and Yale and Princeton and pocket protectors and those really, really, really thick glasses, do we think Dan Campbell? When we think intellectual, do we think Dan Campbell? I don't. And I'll say this. I think I am a thoughtful person. But I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. So I know that when we talk about, again, analytics, high math scores, we don't think Jared Stillman. So now we're supposed to think that Dan Campbell has all the answers? Michael is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. What's up, Michael?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I completely agree with you. The second that I saw them go out and stay on the field for that 4th and 2, the first one that happened, I had said to my dad, it's like, this is a bad idea. Just kick the ball and you're up 17 points. There's literally no reason to ever not go up 3 scores in a game if you can handle it. But I think that now that I was surprised by how many people were defending Dan Campbell after that, and especially with that Orlovsky take that y'all played a few minutes ago. I think at this point that we're seeing a new media Mike Vrabel with the fact that, like, there's so many people in the media that just never say anything bad about him, and I think Dan Campbell has started to earn that reputation a bit. So in a few years when they eventually fire him for doing some very Mike Vrabel-y decisions, that there's going to be people who are saying, oh, well, you can't fire Dan Campbell. He's going to get a job the day after you fire him. So
well,
you can't let that guy go, even though he loses a bunch of games.
Michael, what is going to be the reason? Yeah. What is the number one Mike Vrabel thing Dan Campbell is about to do?
I'm not saying Mike Vrabel.
He is about to lose. Michael, hush. Thank you for your call. He is about to lose his offensive coordinator. Like, just like how Mike Vrabel lost his offensive coordinator and couldn't replace him, Dan Campbell is going to lose his offensive coordinator. And Jared Goff will go back to being Jared Goff, just like Ryan Tannehill went back to being Ryan Tannehill. Like, that is going to happen to the Lions. And they will never, ever, ever, ever get back to that moment right there. They will never, ever do it. And I agree. It's going to be, oh, Dan Campbell's such a great coach. He changed the culture in Detroit. That's okay to celebrate him for that and then say, well, we got to get somebody smarter in here who can take them to the next level. We got to promote the guy, the guru offensive coordinator we have, who I have my questions about in general, but especially after running the ball on that third down. You know, that we got that guru offensive coordinator. Let's try to keep a good thing going with Jared Goff. I actually think it is the right thing to do. I think it is the smart thing to do to prioritize the offensive coordinator over the macho head coach. But they'll never do it. And I agree. Orlovsky's like, oh, you know, if this guy hadn't dropped it, if this guy hadn't fumbled, if this guy. Basically what happened is, at one point, the entire Detroit Lions team completely melted down. And guys that are good, like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, started doing things that they shouldn't do, like drop the ball or fumble the ball or whatever. Gee, what could that one thing have been? I am telling you right now, if you were to call a timeout and take Dan Campbell out of the game, out of the stadium, and put Mike Vrabel there with a headset, the Detroit Lions are in the Super Bowl. I am convinced of it. You will not convince me otherwise, because Vrabel's going to kick that field goal. And as the momentum swings and everything else, Vrabel does not have some egghead on the headset telling him, like, no, coach, the predictability here says that momentum isn't real, and I will give Vrabel that. And I also don't think that Vrabel was as bad with analytics as everybody makes it out to be. I just think that Vrabel probably decided that, you know, we're going to go with the gut sometimes. And sometimes the gut's good. Now, the problem with Campbell is that I think his gut is the problem. Like, his gut wanted to go for it before the half. That is an issue. Texter says, the problem with your theory is that the 49ers scored on 4 straight possessions after the failed conversion. Yes, BP from Springfield, because, again, I think momentum is real. Like, I believe that momentum is real. I believe that pressure is real. I believe that some guys excel under pressure, i.e. Mahomes, and I think some guys absolutely crap their pants under pressure, i.e. Dan Campbell. I think it is absolutely real. It's like Tannehill in that AFC game against the Bengals. Once Tannehill threw that first interception against Cincinnati, you were screwed. If he had gone the first drive and they had gone right down the field and scored a touchdown, I think it would have been a totally different game. But at the end, when the Titans were feeling tight and they were like, oh no, we really don't want Tannehill to throw the ball because he has absolutely poo-pooed his pants today. They ran the ball twice, and C.J. Uzomah said on the sideline, he's like, oh yeah, they're scared. That's real. And if you make it a 3-possession game and the Fox goes to another commercial and they come back out and Brock Purdy takes the field and he throws an incompletion and they start booing, then all of a sudden now it's like an avalanche is going on the 49ers. And Purdy was doing his pants in the first half. That interception he threw to Rodrigo, terrible. And so, again, I know everybody wants to play the game on the computer and they want to come out and say, here are the probabilities. And I'm fine with that. Like, if I was coaching, there is a level of analytics where I would want to ask, like, hey, what do the numbers say we do here? Well, the numbers say that we should kick the field goal here. Okay. Now, I'm the coach. I have that information in my toolbox, and I'm weighing that all with everything else. If I've got a field goal kicker who can't kick, that's going to change my perception. If the analytics are saying we should run the football here, but Derrick Henry's out because he broke his leg, now that may change the perception of what I'm going to do. But not in Detroit. Not here. We're going to go for it all the time. You know, Detroit was lucky enough that they got the first 2 games at home because they should have had to go to the number 2 seed in Dallas, but they didn't because Dallas lost. But they should have been the 2 seed because they should have beaten Dallas because they went for a 2-point conversion on the 7-yard line. And you guys think that's acceptable behavior? Ay, ay, ay. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll roll through more of your phones here on the program, and I do have a Purdy take I want to get off my chest. Stillman & Company, 1025-1063 The Game, here on our program. Stillman & Company, 1025-1063 The Game.
did Brock Purdy put all the criticism to bed with yesterday's performance?
No. He's going to have to do it in the Super Bowl. Have to do it in the Super Bowl. So what good? So let me get this. If he gets to the Super Bowl and he plays like he did against the Ravens, what are you saying, Dio? If he gets to the Super Bowl and plays like he played against the Ravens, what are we going to say? No. Did he answer a lot of my questions? Yes, because I wanted to see him down. I wanted to see every throw matter, every possession matter. He answered that. He turned into the playmaker, even used his legs. Guys, now, we're not going to expect, so we expected him to throw a pass that lands off the defender's head and Ayuk catches it. That's a diagram play. We expected him to roll to his left, throw over a defensive lineman that jumps, and Juwan Jennings goes up with one hand, lays back. We expected that, right, Dio?
What do you want from this dude? What do you want from this guy?
I just asked you a simple question. Is that in the playbook where we throw it 40 yards down the field, hope it hits a defender's head, and Brandon Ayuk catches it? Yes or no? That should have been a pick.
There you go. Ian, did Brock Purdy, you change your mind about Brock Purdy at all off of yesterday?
As far as?
Like how good he is, elite, not elite, that kind of thing?
I mean, not really. He pretty much looked the same as he had in the playoffs, a little bit shaky.
He's fine.
He was fine, yeah.
He's fine. I mean, he doo-dooed his pants in the first half. No way around that. But that yesterday was about Detroit. Like, that was about Detroit. And I kept thinking about, these like big moments for guys when they become elite. And what I think it is I think it's a when you beat the man kind of moment. Like Lamar Jackson yesterday, in order to be the man, you got to beat the man, and he didn't beat the man. Mahomes, he had to beat Joe Burrow last year. Like, that was a big one. Beating Joe Burrow after Burrow had beaten him in the AFC Championship game, that was a big one. Burrow beat the man the year before. Like Tom Brady's first Super Bowl, he had to beat Kurt Warner and the Rams, and he did. I agree with Shannon. Like, let's see the Super Bowl, and then come talk to me. I think he's fine. But I really thought in that first half, if Dan Campbell didn't choke that game away, Kyle Shanahan would be on the phone right now with Kirk Cousins, because Brock Purdy did not look up to it in the first half yesterday. And I almost kind of hate that for Shanahan, because he's got a win-now team. Like, their window is this year, next year, and maybe the year after that. And I don't know if Purdy's Dak Prescott or not. I don't know. Like, he's gone through Jordan Love and Jared Goff. You want to win the Super Bowl, and this is what we always talked about with Tannehill. You want to win the Super Bowl in the AFC, you're going to have to go through Josh Allen one week, Patrick Mahomes the next week, Joe Burrow the next week. Now throw in Aaron Rodgers, or a couple years ago it was Tom Brady. And the reason why the Titans couldn't get to the Super Bowl is because they ran into Mahomes. So I'm not Purdy. You guys can have him. Tyron in Brentwood is up next, 615-737-1025. Tyron, go ahead.
Yeah, anybody defending Dan Campbell needs to have their head examined and their brain dead. He completely gagged that game. I mean, he teed down his leg, and your heart goes out for Detroit fans, because they have been wearing the weight of 30 years of substitute. And in that moment where if he just kicks the field goal, goes up 3 scores, I believe Purdy was about to panic and make another ill-advised interception or big mistake. I mean, the game was won. And I knew right when he didn't kick the field goal and the receiver dropped the ball, I said, okay, yep, they're the Lions, and here comes improbable comeback, which never should have been in play. Campbell blew it, and I agree with you. I'm not so sure I let that offensive coordinator get out the door. I mean, it would be extreme, but you got to check the temperature in the room. He's the real reason why they had the success this year, because he made Jared Goff look like a great quarterback, and you're right. He's going to go right back to sucking when he gets out of there and then sticking with Macho Man Randy Savage. So he completely blew it. And I also say this, Lamar, he's not a big game quarterback. He cannot lose that game yesterday, Jared. They held the Chiefs to 17 points and 0 in the second half. Now, if I had told anybody a week ago that the Chiefs wasn't going to score but 17 points, we would all agree the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl, and Lamar couldn't get it done. A boneheaded interception, a strip sack, held the ball entirely too long numerous times. He's not a big game quarterback. He doesn't belong on the same field with Mahomes. And in 2 weeks, This is to Mahomes to continue on the Brady trajectory. He cannot lose to Purdy. He cannot allow Brock Purdy be the reason why he don't go back-to-back. Take care, my friend.
Tyron, thank you for your call. I mean, I will get to Lamar in the next segment because I do have a lot of thoughts on the AFC game. On the NFC game front, he brought up that once they didn't get the first one, Josh Reynolds dropped the ball and they didn't convert, and all of a sudden it's a two-possession game. I sat there and I thought, oh, my God, what a stooge. I mean, I texted Coach Shoup and I was like, I'm going to go crazy that he didn't kick that field goal. And Coach Shoup told me, he's like, my brother just texted me the same thing. And I go back to the Ben Johnson thing, right? So to me, this is a choice of if we fire Dan Campbell because Dan Campbell is a dope, it's not, okay, now we're going to go out and bring in Barry Switzer to coach. It is we're going to elevate Ben Johnson to be the head coach, who's going to get a head coaching job anyways. Is that really so bad? And I keep going back to the decision that the Chicago Bulls made. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals in 1989. And they fired Doug Collins. And they elevated Phil Jackson. Was that a bad decision? I mean, I know the people in Chicago booed Jerry Krause a couple weeks ago, but I mean, I think it was a smart decision to elevate the greatest coach in basketball history. Well, maybe Red Auerbach's ahead of Phil, but you know what I mean. So if Johnson's the better coach, and I can't imagine that he's not, if Johnson's the better coach, why would you not fire Dan Campbell to elevate Johnson? One texter says, so you think if the Lions lose their OC, they're done? What if the Steelers don't hire Arthur Smith and Detroit goes after him? I think that would be a good fit for him. It just kind of feels like it's the secret sauce with Johnson. Like they felt like a team that had one shot to get it done. Whereas all the other teams, like they've got the pieces to be back. They might not be back next year, but like they've got the pieces to make another run at it. Whereas like you in 2019, that kind of felt like that was Detroit's shot. That's just my opinion, though. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Now to the AFC game. Lamar and Mahomes, that was a heavyweight fight, and you should be allowed to draw the lines of demarcation after that yesterday. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company. 615-737-1025 here on the program. And, hey, Super Saturday. Be sure to join us for our first ever Super Saturday on Saturday, February 10th at New Heights Brewery in Nashville, 1 to 5, for this fun, family-friendly Soup Fest benefiting the National Predators Foundation. Enjoy live music, games for kids, and come sample soup from Mafiosa's, 615 Chutney, Westin Hotel, Jaspers, and more. To purchase tickets and to see participating restaurants, go to theGameNashville.com/soup, and you can also enter to win tickets to Super Saturday. Just text in the keyword soup, S-O-U-P now, to 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios on a championship Monday. Congratulations to the Chiefs. They played great yesterday. Congratulations to the 49ers. The Lions played like morons, thanks in large part to their head coach. But, again, congratulations all around. So, Ian, what did the great Ric Flair used to say?
Woo! Something like that, right?
And?
To be the man, you have to beat the man.
You have to beat the man. And yesterday, Lamar Jackson had his chance. And Lamar Jackson failed. And I know. There are going to be a lot of people that say, oh, it wasn't his fault that Zay Flowers tried to reach the ball over the goal line. And I know there are a lot of people that are going to say, look, Mahomes is really good, and there's a lot of quarterbacks that can't beat Mahomes. And I know everybody's going to say that. But at some point, if you want to join the elite of the elite, you got to beat the man. How did Peyton Manning get to his first Super Bowl? He beat Tom Brady in an AFC title game. How about Ben Roethlisberger? He beat Peyton Manning. At some point, if you want to be the king, you've got to slay him. And I thought early in the game yesterday, I thought Lamar was going for it. When he avoided the sack and he threw the ball to Zay Flowers for the touchdown, I thought, oh, baby, here we go, shot for shot. When Mahomes goes down the first drive and does not throw an incompletion and throws an incredible pass and an incredible catch to Travis Kelce for a touchdown, I'm like, that is Patrick Mahomes sending a message to the other sideline that is, if you come for the king, you best not miss. And then when Lamar fired back, I thought, okay, here comes the heavyweight fight. And yet, in the end, Lamar couldn't hang. That's what it was. All the concerns that have followed Lamar Jackson's career about not being able to win the big one, and most importantly, not being able to win the big one from the pocket, they were all kind of proven true yesterday. Like, it's great that you can beat Ryan Tannehill in a playoff game, or that you can beat a young upstart Houston Texan team that wasn't even supposed to really be there. Like, it's great you can beat them, and I'm happy for you. And I'm glad Lamar wins all these regular season games, and he is a very good quarterback. And he's proven everybody that doubted him before he was drafted, including me, he's proven everybody wrong. But with Lamar, there's always that extra step. There is, can Lamar match all of the regular season winning and accomplishments, 2 league MVPs? Can he match that in the playoffs? And I feel like yesterday was kind of the moment where it was like, no, he can't. At home, great defense. If you want to win in the AFC, you're going to have to beat the man at some point because there are too many good quarterbacks. Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Rodgers. It looks like Stroud in a couple of years might be one of those guys. There are so many good quarterbacks in the AFC. This is what it used to be. It used to be, if you want to win in the AFC, he had to go through Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. Like, it's hard. And when it comes to Josh Allen, for instance, I feel like his losses to Mahomes, and it's not nothing that he loses to Mahomes in every playoff game he plays, including the one at home. But his losses are, he got the short end of the stick, right? 13 seconds to go. Defense gives up a big gain. They don't get the ball in overtime. He loses. Tyler Bass misses the field goal. Allen, it felt like last week went shot for shot with Mahomes. Lamar, when he played Josh Allen and he lost 17-7, And then yesterday, when he lost, it just feels like Lamar doesn't belong on the same field with those guys. That's what it really felt like to me. And I think about history when it comes to the great quarterbacks of our time, like the great quarterbacks and the very, very, very good quarterbacks. Like, is Lamar Jackson Rich Gannon? Is Lamar Jackson one of these MVP caliber quarterbacks, but in the playoffs, they just, Donovan McNabb, who I don't think ever won an MVP, but Donovan probably could never go toe-to-toe with the great quarterbacks. Is he one of those guys? I mean, think about, like, the last era of quarterbacks. And whether it's, again, Dan Marino's, I think, a good example of this. Dan Marino's a Hall of Famer, and 4 years ago, he was part of the NFL Top 100. But he couldn't get past Jim Kelly in the playoffs. And he lost a Super Bowl to Joe Montana. And he's losing playoff games to Drew Bledsoe and Tony Eason. And, I mean, at some point, like, Dan Marino, I'm sorry, but there's a reason why you're not considered one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and it's because you couldn't beat the guy. Joe Burrow beat the guy. He went on the road to Arrowhead and beat Mahomes in a playoff game. There is a reason why Mahomes has been beaten by two quarterbacks in the playoffs in his career, Joe Burrow and Tom Brady. That's it. Like, there's a reason for that. And so I hate to say it for Lamar, but I don't think he'll ever stand up there with the true greats of the game, with Manning, Brady, Elway, Mahomes, Roger Staubach, Johnny Unitas. He'll always be short of that. And it's because he can't beat Mahomes when it matters. He can't beat Josh Allen when it matters. He just can't win in the playoffs when it matters. He's Charles Barkley. He's Karl Malone. He's Clyde Drexler. Those guys were awesome. But they couldn't beat Michael Jordan. And then as soon as the game went over to Kobe, they couldn't beat him. Now, Drexler was, too early for Kobe, but you know what I mean. Like, they could not beat those guys. Joe Burrow is 3-1 all-time versus Mahomes and 1-1 in the playoffs. And they've played in 2 AFC championship games, and it is even. Burrow won his by 3. Mahomes won his by 3. Sorry, Lamar ain't it. And I think it's officially time, and it's okay to admit it. But Lamar, while he has exceeded every single expectation after being drafted 32nd, he just can't get over that hump and outduel the AFC's best quarterbacks. And that kind of is the path for Phillip Rivers. That's kind of what Lamar's going to be. He's going to be in the discussion. The Ravens are going to be good. They'll be in the playoffs. But they're not going to knock off Kansas City with Mahomes. And they're probably not going to knock off Joe Burrow in Cincinnati in playoff games. And they're probably not going to knock off Josh Allen in Buffalo in playoff games. It just is what it is. I had no dog in the fight, though I don't like the Ravens. I kind of root against them just because, they're Titans rivals. But when I got to that game yesterday, I kept waiting for Lamar to make the difference. And then he throws into triple coverage in the end zone and the game's over. And Andy Reid took the ball out of the air, or took the air out of the ball in the second half because they had a 2-possession lead for most of it. And I think he knew in his heart, I'm going to make Lamar come from behind and beat me. And if Lamar does, if they get the ball and they start moving it up and down the field and putting the ball in the end zone, now I'm going to have to change my game plan, and I'm going to have Patrick start doing the same thing. But he didn't. They ran the ball with Pacheco way too much for my liking in that second half. But it was to put the pressure on Lamar. Andy wanted Lamar in the pocket throwing the ball. You know what he did? He treated Lamar the way he treated Ryan Tannehill 4 years ago. That's what he did. He doesn't treat Josh Allen like that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones on that. 615-737-1025. And then the other guy, Mahomes. Mahomes, oh my God. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company here on our program. Window Nation. That's right. Winter is here. And apparently it's supposed to get cold again, like really cold again, or that's upcoming soon enough. I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist, but what you really want is you want to keep that cold air out of your house. That's how those drafts get in, and then you got to crank up the heat, and then your energy prices soar, and then all of a sudden the sun comes out, and then you're on fire, and you're almost melting. It's awful. So make sure you've got the right windows, and do that with Window Nation. They're online at windownation.com. Talk to the pros at Window Nation, because replacing those old windows is easier and more affordable than you think. No interest for 5 years, and 50% off all window styles. Do not wait. Simply call 866-90-NATION or go online to windownation.com. Again, that's no interest for 5 years and 50% off all window styles. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
I believe there's still a chance that Lamar can get to and win a Super Bowl because he has that kind of ability. But in big moments, Lamar Jackson has yet to show up when the team absolutely needs him to. And that's the thing. A lot of times what makes these great quarterbacks historically great, when you take an aspect away, you take the running game away. We've seen Manning, we've seen Brady, we've seen Mahomes, we've seen other great quarterbacks go win those type games. Yes, you are a run-reliant team first, but if Lamar Jackson is to be believed as what he is, he's got to win this game.
That was Shannon, and I don't disagree. I mean, for me, this was, with all the stink that Lamar had put up last year about his contract and wanting certain players on his team. By the way, Odell really provided a big lift for them yesterday. Getting a new offensive coordinator, having the season they had, like, this was the moment. You've got Kansas City at home, and he couldn't do it. Now, I want to talk about Mahomes for a second. I am not ready to say that Patrick Mahomes is better than Tom Brady. A lot of people are saying that. I don't believe that. And again, in order to be the man, you got to beat the man. And Brady was 2-0 in the playoffs against Mahomes. And those were kind of peak those guys. Mahomes had already won his first Super Bowl. But remember, Mahomes' first Super Bowl, he didn't have to go through the man. Thanks in large part to you. Because you beat Lamar Jackson, who was league MVP. You beat Tom Brady. And so he had to go through Deshaun Watson, Tannehill, and then Jimmy G. But last year, he had to beat the man. He had to beat Joe Burrow. And so, I mean, when it comes to Mahomes, so I'm not going to say he's better than Brady. Because, I mean, Brady threw for 500 yards in a Super Bowl. But when it comes to Mahomes, there is nothing he could do that would surprise me anymore. Like, he's got eyes across his entire head. There was a play yesterday where he threw the football to Kelsey, and I think Kelsey made an incredible one-handed catch, but Clowney was right behind him, and there was no way he could have sensed that Clowney was there. And he released the ball 1 millisecond before Clowney hit him. And I was like, how did he know that? And on every scramble, he knows exactly where that first down marker is. And even if he gets hit before the marker, he finds the way to fall forward so that the ball just gets over the marker. The only offensive mistake I think Kansas City made yesterday was when they went for it on fourth down, and that was because, unlike Dan Campbell, there was real strategy behind it of, we're going to try to score a touchdown this close to the goal line so that we put more pressure on Lamar Jackson. And Andy took the ball out of Mahomes' hands. I didn't even have a problem with Andy letting Mahomes throw the ball to Valdez-Scantling at the end of the game. The only thing I was worried about was, is Valdez-Scantling going to catch it? When this guy is in the playoffs, there's almost nothing he would do that could surprise me. If you told me that he walks away from this game and he wins 15 championships, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. There's nothing he could do that would shock me. Nothing. And as long as he's got Travis Kelce, he can make these other guys good enough when it matters. And I think that we are in for our next Brady Manning, and it is Mahomes and Burrow. Sorry to Allen. Sorry to Jackson. They're a step behind. They can end up being Big Ben. They can end up being Phillip Rivers. They can end up being these other AFC quarterbacks. But I think the Brady Manning is Mahomes and Burrow. And I cannot wait till Joe Burrow gets healthy so we can watch those two duel it out. But, there's nothing he can do that surprise. He could throw for 800 yards in the Super Bowl. It wouldn't surprise me. There's nothing he can do. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. By the way, Vingan texted me while I was talking. Some long spiel from one of these analytic gurus, Ian. And it was basically that this analytic guru thinks that Mahomes has passed Brady and Manning as the peak greatest of all time.
Well, the analytic gurus.
I'll just say it to you like this. Mahomes has 2 Super Bowls and 2 MVPs, and that's incredible. And I'd put him in the top 100 quarterbacks if we were redoing that again. Brady is 7-3. And that has to count for something. You know what? Brady and Mahomes, it's going to become the new Michael and LeBron. The only difference is Brady beat Mahomes twice. But that is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like 5 years from now,
New
who's
school,
better?
old school. Yeah.
Who's better, Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes? And it's not nothing that Brady beat him twice, including once on his home field. Like that does matter. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Cole from Adams, Tennessee, has been waiting patiently and is up next. What's up, Cole?
Hey, Jared, I completely agree with you that, Lamar's not the man, but I also think that, coaching needs to be held a little bit more accountable because if you look at it, the Ravens had rushed for 100 yards in a game, every game since the first game of 2022, and they only ran the ball 6 times yesterday. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
So I think Andy took that away from him. Thank you, Cole. I think that Andy Reid, what he did is he decided we're going to play the game that I want to play. And if you beat me playing the game that I want to play, if you beat me with Nelson Aguilar and Odell Beckham and Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, then you win and I will shake your hand. But the old man used to always tell us, if you want to stop the run, you can stop the run. You just bring down one more than they can block. And so I think that's what Kansas City did. Kansas City said, we are not going to let you run the ball. We are going to give you looks that are going to make you throw the football. And I think Andy felt comfortable doing that. That's why I believe Andy took the ball out of Mahomes' hands in the second half and basically said, hey, I'm not saying that like when they got the ball, they weren't trying to score touchdowns. But I think it was pretty obvious Andy was trying short gain, move the chains, run the clock, put more pressure on Lamar, and take the air out of the ball. And it's the exact same game they played against you in the AFC title game, except they didn't have to come from behind. But it was like, we're not going to let Derrick Henry win this game for them. And then in the second half, they took the air out of the ball, and by taking the air out of the ball, the Titans kind of puckered up a little bit, and all of a sudden, Tannehill's throwing it a bunch. And that's the masterclass that is Andy Reid. I do not think coaching decided the AFC title game in terms of, Harbaugh didn't run it enough, and I think the AFC title game was decided by 3 things. 1, Mahomes. 2, Lamar. 3, the Ravens defense did not dominate the way Chris Jones did yesterday. And there is something to be said about Chris Jones. He's got that Lawrence Taylor in him, which is Lawrence Taylor. I heard Belichick talking about this one point, which was Lawrence didn't give it 100% every play. But if there was a big third down in the fourth quarter, Lawrence Taylor was going to make that play. And that's what Chris Jones does in these games. And so I think that Ravens defense, which everybody was hyping up and was supposed to be so dominant, they really didn't get the big stops or the big turnover or anything like that. But Chris Jones dominated that game. And then L'Jarius Sneed, the other great defensive player they had, popped that ball out right there at the goal line from Zay Flowers. And that's what I think decided the game. And so coaching, certainly Andy coached well, but I didn't think it was the coaches that cost the team one way or another. The NFC game, I think that was all about the coaching and the bad coaching from Detroit. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. There is something I got to get on the Ravens about. And if you want to hold this to coaching, you can do that, but we'll do that coming up next. FanDuel Sportsbook is my official sportsbook app. That's right. FanDuel wants to wish everybody a happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate it. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring, well, the most fun you can have. The best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and, of course, placing super bets. For me, as I said, I don't know if I can pick against Mahomes doing anything. I'm just going to be, I got Brock Purdy on one hand and I got Mahomes on the other. So make that however you want to when it comes to all these Super Bowl bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet who will win the Super Bowl on FanDuel, but you can also bet which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet or more wins. Just go to FanDuel.com/JGM to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. And make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 and older and present in Tennessee, $10 first deposit required. Bonuses issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
The drive that began at the 1-yard line has now reached the Chiefs' 25, 2nd and 10. To the end zone again, and it is intercepted. Intercepted by Deion Bush, who just came in 2 plays ago for Mike Edwards. You had to get a field goal minimum on this drive. You couldn't.
What a poor mistake.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. You cannot make that decision.
Second giveaway in the end zone by Baltimore. 3 on the game.
Can we talk for a second about how stupid the Ravens played yesterday? And that interception by Lamar was incredibly stupid. I mean, you can hear that in the Jim Nantz disappointed dad call. Ian, can we get that cut again? You can hear Jim Nantz after he calls the play like, Jim's not going to yell at you. Jim's not going to ask you, what were you thinking? He's not going to degrade you. But he was very disappointed.
The drive that began at the 1 yard line has now reached the Chiefs 25, 2nd and 10. To the end zone again, and it is intercepted. Intercepted by Deion Bush, who just came in 2 plays ago for Mike Edwards. You had to get a field goal minimum on this drive. You couldn't.
What a poor mistake.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. You cannot make that decision.
Second giveaway in the end zone by Baltimore. 3 on the game.
You hear Nance there. He is so disappointed. It's like, what a terrible mistake. You could not do that. You marched all the way from your 1 yard line. Lamar, how could you have thrown that football? Oh, my goodness. And that was a microcosm of the whole game. I mean, it's not like, if you had told me that Baltimore was going to do as many stupid things as they did, I would have assumed that they would have lost by 30. I'm serious. I mean, whether it was the Kyle Van Noy, just ridiculous, unnecessary roughness, personal foul penalty. Ian, I texted Porth when that happened, and I was like, if Floyd was general manager of the Ravens, he would have cut Van Noy at halftime for that penalty.
That was a bad one.
Kansas City runs the ball. They get nothing. What Kansas City is doing is they're going to run the ball, get nothing. They're going to run the ball again. And if they get nothing, they're going to go to the locker room. And at that point, it's going to be a 7-point game. Like, they're going to go to the locker room and say, okay, we'll get the ball to start the second half. It's a 1-possession game. All right. Instead, Van Noy ends up picking up a 15-yard penalty. Now Kansas City's in business. Then they hit they hit Mahomes unnecessarily after the play. Stupid! Like, if you're going to beat the Chiefs, you can't do that. You cannot do the dumb stuff. Zay Flowers gets up, spins the ball in the guy's face. Zay Flowers, you have done nothing in the NFL. You are not T.O. And this is the playoffs. This is like in hockey when we talk about, well, so-and-so cheap shot at him last game. Right. And that's a next year problem. So next year when you play Anaheim, you can cross-check the guy and drop the gloves and go after him. But in game 5 of a playoff series, we need you to focus. And, I mean, I just looked at it right now. The Ravens had 8 penalties yesterday for 95 yards. The Chiefs, 3 for 30. And I know, if I told you that before the game, you would have said, oh, there's the referees helping out the Chiefs. And I didn't feel like the referees helped out the Chiefs. In fact, I think the referees wiped off a touchdown right before the half on that Trey Smith hold that I didn't really think was a hold. And I'm somebody that, generally speaking, can spot holds and calls them out. I didn't think that was a hold. And the Ravens, on their touchdown drive, they went for it on 4th down. Lamar got a big gain, and the guard basically clotheslined and tackled the defensive end for the Chiefs. So I didn't think that the officiating was slanted at all against the Ravens. I just think they played stupid. Lamar trying to throw into triple coverage in a 10-point game. Dude, you check that ball down. You kick that field goal. There is plenty of game left. Like, you do that. Mahomes doesn't do stupid stuff like that in the playoffs. Roquan Smith. I get it. They were going to have Roquan Smith jump offside, and that would then allow the Chiefs to get a first down by gaining the 5 yards. And if I were the Chiefs and they had jumped offside, I'd have declined the penalty. I'd have kept it at 1st and 5. But I understand what they were doing. But nope, Roquan Smith has to tackle the guy and get a personal foul. I mean, I thought the Ravens were composed. I thought this was a veteran team. I thought this was a well-coached team that has a good head coach and has 2 great coordinators. This is the team that on Christmas Day, shoved it right up the 49ers' keister. And they got totally discombobulated.
The Mahomes factor.
It was Mahomes.
It's when they were having some long possessions there too for a while on offense. Kansas City, driving down and not making mistakes, and you just start to get frustrated as the other team. You can't hit him. He keeps getting rid of the ball. They keep, and it's just frustrating. And you get behind and you start to panic, and it starts to unravel.
Dylan says, I thought it was funny when the cameras panned to Harbaugh after a defensive lineman straight up punched Mahomes in the face mask directly after a throw, and Harbaugh looked confused as to why they threw the flag for unnecessary roughness. I think that the NFL told the referees, and I got to give the referees credit, because I was on Sirius on Saturday, and I said the one thing that I begged of the officials was in both games, let the players and coaches decide the outcome. And I'm going to give them credit, because I do feel like in both games, the players in the first game and the coaches in the second game decided the outcome. But I think the NFL knew, like, hey, if we make some controversial calls like we did last year in that Bengals-Chiefs AFC title game, if we make controversial calls in favor of the Chiefs in this game, then everybody's going to go all conspiracy theory on us and think this is all about Taylor Swift and that we're pulling for the Chiefs and that we sent Sean Smith out there to referee that game like the NBA sends that Scott Foster places, and we don't want that stigma attached to us. And I think they reffed like it. Again, I understand how you could have called the hold on the Rashee Rice touchdown that got wiped off the board before halftime, but I wouldn't have thrown the flag for that. And I am quick to point out holding. Like, I am very quick. I see a shoulder pad being grabbed, I'm like, holding. There was one where 56 of the Chiefs had two Ravens blocking him, and one of those plays where Lamar had about 95 minutes in the pocket, and one guy was on his right side pulling the right shoulder pad, and the other guy was on the left side pulling the left shoulder pad. And I'm like, at some point you have to throw the flag there. And the guy didn't even throw his hands up asking for a flag. It was just blatantly obvious they didn't throw it. So it really was. The Ravens woke up yesterday and decided that they were going to be wildly undisciplined. And you're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes doing that. Like, what was the matter with that team yesterday? Unbelievable. One texter says that personal foul call was terrible. Which one? The one on Van Noy? I didn't have a problem with the one on Van Noy. He came over to Kelsey, and he gave him a little headbutt or whatever it was, and that's enough for me.
I think it was the offside one. That was kind of borderline.
I don't think that was borderline. I think Roquan Smith took a cheap shot there.
You think so?
Yeah. So,
it's just hard to, gauge intent there. So, I don't know.
Was it hard to gauge intent, though?
I mean...
You think he jumped the snap count?
Well, I think he tried to pretend like he jumped the snap count, and he just took it a little bit too far.
I think what he did was, I think he was frustrated, and he knew that, hey, my job is to get offside here, but I have to get offside before the ball gets snapped, because if I'm offside as the ball snapped, now they have a free play, and now I'm really porked, so I have to do this ahead of time in order to pick up the penalty, to give him the first down, and so I'm going to do it. But because he was going to do it, he knew that he had to hit, he had to touch the guy, and it had to be clearly before the ball was snapped. He was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a little extra juice. And I don't have a problem with throwing the personal foul there. I think it was a good call. I just think the Ravens played with zero discipline yesterday. And that's not just the penalties. Like, was it Karlaftis? They got the strip sack, or was it Jones? I can't remember who got the strip sack, but the left tackle gets beat. Lamar has no idea.
It's the guy who got hurt.
Omenihu?
Yeah.
He has no idea that Omenihu is coming behind him. And for some reason, Mahomes, who's got eyes in the back of his head, he can feel when Omenihu, like when the guy's behind him, but Lamar can't. And that's not a knock on Lamar. That's just how great Mahomes is. And so they fumble that football, and that right there that happens. Zay Flowers trying to reach the ball out over the goal line and it getting punched out, that's stupid. Lamar throwing into triple coverage in the end zone, stupid. The Ravens, that was a team that was disciplined and smart all year. What the hell's the matter with them? 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones. Plus, we got to talk about TV yesterday. I got a lot of thoughts. We'll do that next here on the program. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. That's right. Hiller's taking great care of my home for the last, 6 years, 7 years? I can't even keep track anymore. They are the best. In fact, I'm going to have Hiller out to the house later this week. 100% satisfaction of Happy You'll Be, or the service is free. And I know that, again, because I use Hiller at my home. They are the best. Hiller offers true transparency pricing, which means that Hiller will line item every part of the job up front, so a homeowner like me or you can easily understand what we're paying for and why. It's really convenient. No hidden fees, no added costs, no surprises when you get that bill. And that is why I love Hiller. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
McDonald hoping his defense can somehow make a play and busting across. Is Roquan Smith just knocking Trey Smith on his backside.
Mahomes, this team does a great job with their cadence. Oh, Jim, there's a chance. You think they jumped off sides on purpose just to start the downs on a 1st and 10 with no clock really going off?
Be a brilliant move, wouldn't it?
I mean, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of reasons to come.
Personal foul, unnecessary
That's
roughness,
where it's wrong.
defense, number 0.
That's the
15-yard penalty, automatic, first down.
There's one thing about being offside. There's another thing for being a little too aggressive about being offside.
Yeah, taking advantage of the
idea, the strategy.
I was just thinking it. I'm like,
pretty cool nuance.
Not a lot of reasons for me to think he would do this year, but it's not the worst thing just to lean over and tap him.
Well, you still got your 1st and 10, but they get to snap it at the 45.
Yeah, think about 15 yards back. I mean, that's brilliant because it's really hard to stop 5 yards.
There you go. It was Tony Romo yesterday doing the breakdown. And I don't know about you guys, but like as soon as I saw Roquan Smith hit the lineman, I knew exactly what he was doing. Like I knew exactly what he was doing. Vrabel did it in a game against the Jets years ago, and it was actually pretty smart. And they ended up not having to burn the timeout and everything else. And here's Tony that's like, well, Jim, you know, the cadence they got right there. Oh, wait a minute, Jim. What if it was that they wanted to give him a 1st down so that they have to defend 10 yards instead of 5 yards? But that's not what Tony said. Like, Tony was so discombobulated. And quite frankly, he's been discombobulated for the last 3 years. I remember Thanksgiving Day, 2021, Raiders-Cowboys. Game went to overtime. And the Cowboys had not done a good job of stopping the Raiders. And the Cowboys had the ball in overtime. And the Cowboys were deep in their own end. And it was 4th and 9. And Romo goes, Jim, they haven't been able to get a stop. And the Cowboys haven't been able to get a stop. So do you think they should go for it on 4th and 9? And Nance, who is not the analyst, just goes, I don't think that's a very good idea, Tony. And it's how many times does it feel like Nance is having to try to put Tony back on the train tracks? And yet 6 years ago in the AFC title game, the Brady-Mahomes showdown, Tony Romo was on point. So I don't know what's happened to Tony Romo, but he stinks. And the CBS crew stinks outside of Tracy. Tracy Wolfson is great. The pregame show, too many people. I'm sorry, I don't care what J.J. Watt has to say. Like, what happened to the old days when it was J.B., Boomer, Dan, and Coach? You know, now we got too many people. Got to get J.J. Watt in there. We got to get Phil Simms in there because we feel bad about demoting Phil Simms. It's like too many people. Too many. I like the old days when Fox just had J.B., Terry, Howie, Jimmy. That was perfect. That's all we need. Now all these pregame shows are trying to like outnumber the other one. Yeah, you got 9 guys. We got 15. It's unbelievable. So the first thing is Romo stinks. The second thing is Greg Olsen. Twitter loves him. Like every game Greg Olsen does, everybody on Twitter is just like, I almost feel like these Twitter people are like drinking their wine and saying, oh, that was a fabulous football performance by Greg Olsen calling the game. And yet I'm sitting there and I'm like, Olsen never stops talking. So it's like as soon as the play's over, Olsen has to talk for the 40 seconds in between the next play. So it doesn't feel like he and Burkhardt, in my opinion, are having a conversation while he's doing the game. It feels like Burkhardt calls the play and then Olsen just starts talking. But apparently, I'm the only person in America who thinks that. I can't wait until Tom Brady is in the booth next year. Because Olsen, he's not awful. He's not what Romo is right now. But I'm not into it. And then yesterday, he patronized Dan Campbell's stupidity too much. And my real takeaway from TV this weekend, I miss Joe and Troy. Like when they went to the NFC title game and that music came on and it's Detroit and San Francisco, it's like, where are Joe and Troy? And as I watched that game, I realized how much I missed the fact that when Joe and Troy call a game, like there is real camaraderie. They are best buds. Like I read Joe Buck's book, and apparently Joe Buck's wife, Michelle Beisner Buck, was with NFL Network at the time. She's now with ESPN like he is. But when he first had a crush on her, like he said that they were up in the booth and he was watching her the whole game, and he and Aikman were like buddies and wingmen. Like it was their best buddies calling the game. And so it's like a good camaraderie between the two, like Madden and Summerall. Crispy and Pete Weber have that kind of like brotherhood calling a game together. And not only that, I bet Troy would have just annihilated Dan Campbell yesterday. And instead I got Greg Olson patronizing every move Dan Campbell makes. Well, that's a great move to go for it on 4th down and not take a 3-possession lead because some analytic number I'm not even looking at probably tells me that that's the right decision to make. Oh, TV yesterday was horrible. I had to get that off my chest. The other thing is it doesn't look like Belichick's going to get a job. So Belichick probably does go to TV. And it's too bad. Because, I think Floyd, this is just my assumption of how he felt, but I felt like Floyd always kind of looked at it as a negative that he was doing the radio. Like that, and I don't think that he didn't enjoy doing this job, but I think like when it came to his football buddies were still doing football, and it was like, what about you? Yeah, I'm doing the radio, I'm just over here doing radio. I used to be GM in the NFL. And I think that instead of kind of accepting it of like, hey, this is actually like, it's less stressful, it's kind of fun, whatever. I think he kind of looked at it like, all my football buddies are doing football and I'm kind of, over here. And now it's like Belichick's going to have to do TV. Now, I don't know what role would be best for Belichick, but I'd watch Belichick on TV. What I would do is I would put Belichick in the Amazon booth with Michaels. That's what I would do. And I think Bill would probably, kind of energize Al Michaels a little bit. And I think Bill probably respects Al Michaels and all of his career and history of doing games. That's what I would do. I'd put those old two Cooters together, and and I think it'd be pretty good. But I did want to get that off my chest when it came to TV. One texter says, did you hear Michael Strahan ask George Kittle if he was excited for his first Super Bowl appearance? And Kittle corrected him that it was his second. It was comedy. Strahan sent it back to the studio immediately. Well, didn't Dan Patrick do that maybe 10 years ago at the Super Bowl with Gronk when the Patriots won their 4th? Because it had been 10 years in between Super Bowls. And Dan Patrick was like, Gronk, what's it like to win this again? And Gronk's like, well, Dan, it's my first one. Also, Ian, do you like Gronk on TV?
Yeah, not really.
I don't either. I'm not
I mean, I get it. He's goofy and he kind of, comedic relief per se, but nah, I'm good.
I think Gronk would be best suited like on the Pat McAfee show.
Yeah, that's a good fit.
Like that's where he should be.
Or, put him on the Nickelodeon broadcast when they do that for the Super Bowl.
Texter says, I like how Romo disagreed with Nance several times. Did they do a lot of disagreeing?
Nah, not usually. But I don't know.
Dylan says, why doesn't Kevin Harlan have a major TV broadcasting job? He is the best. Let me say this. If I was one of these networks, like if I was Fox and Joe Buck and Troy Aikman left, instead of just promoting my number 2 booth, which that's probably what Burkhart and Olsen are. Burkhart's fine. He's not, I think to be number 1, there's got to be something special about you. And I don't think anything about Burkhart is special. I think Ian Eagle is ready for the number 1 chair. I think Fox or whoever's got a number 1 spot next, Ian Eagle needs to be atop the list. Harlan is a little too much for me. I'm not a huge Harlan guy.
He's stuck to radio pretty much too, right? Yeah. Kevin Harlan.
Yeah. I think Ian Eagle is kind of the next in line. But I love Ian Eagle, and I think he should be, again, for the next number 1 job that comes open, that would be it's hands down pick 'em. The problem is, though, Ian is now going to be number 1 on college basketball for the tournament. And that was probably in order to keep Ian Eagle, so he couldn't go to Fox anyways. And Fox, I don't know. Burkhart, he's fine. And, that's how I feel about Joe Davis, their baseball guy who replaced Buck. He's fine. They're fine, but they could do better. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, what if that was a Titan coach who coached the way that Dan Campbell coached yesterday? How would I react? How would you react? How should we react? We'll do that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. Ian, do you think that I'm a TV yeller? Like when I watch games that I yell at the TV?
Well, based on your Twitter feed, I would say yes.
I am kind of a TV yeller.
I
really
mean,
more
sometimes
so,
you'll tweet in all caps. It kind of feels like you'd be yelling at the TV like that, or just yelling in general.
More so at the officiating than anything else. But
Fair.
I do yell at the TV. Are you a TV yeller?
Sometimes, yeah.
I'm a TV yeller.
Yeah.
But most of the time when I'm watching football games that I have no true, attachment to, I watch them, and if I see something stupid, I'm like, oh, that's stupid. But I don't get to. Like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Detroit Lions last week. I watched that game, but it wasn't like I was sitting there thinking, oh, Baker, why are you throwing that ball at whatever. But could I help myself yesterday watching the stupidity of Dan Campbell, the Lions head coach, the meltdown that ensued after he chose not to take a 3-possession lead midway through the third quarter in a game in which would have put all of the pressure on San Francisco, an entire stadium on a 5'10" quarterback that is trying to prove himself, and instead that moron went for it. And it wasn't the first time that I yelled at the TV yesterday during that Lions game. The first time was before halftime when they end up not getting in the end zone. They call timeout with 15 seconds left, and they show Campbell on the sideline, and he's standing there with his headset on fourth down, and it's like, fourth down from the 3, 15 seconds. What do I do here? And I'm like, kick the ball. And all of a sudden he puts his arms up for field goal. And I'm like, thank you. I had no dog in that fight. So yesterday, my dad and I watched the NFC title game, and we watched the complete and total meltdown of the Detroit Lions. All that hard work over the last 30 years, everything that those fans had been through, right down the toilet because the idiot coach cannot kick field goals. He is allergic to it. I don't know if it's analytics. I don't know if he's just a hamburger head. I don't know. And I said to my dad, I go, so help me God, if that is a Titans coach that ever does that in an AFC championship game. So Brian Callahan, and I like Brian Callahan. Sat down with him last week. I think he's a straight shooter. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's confident in himself. I like Brian Callahan. I certainly like him a lot more than the GM. I think there's something to this guy. And he's probably not at the stage yet where people tell him he's got to listen to what's said on the radio, and I don't know if he does or doesn't, or if he will care or won't care. But Brian Callahan, I want you to know this. If you ever do what Dan Campbell did yesterday, you will set me to an entirely different level, both on the radio, and I will be at that next press conference, and I will be saying, Coach, do you know how to count? I won't ask it the way that everybody else asks it. With, Coach, you guys decided to go for it there on fourth down instead of the kicking the field goal, 3 possessions. I will say this, Coach, do you know how many possessions the other team has to get in order to score 17 points? And do you realize the difference between 14 points and 17 points? How many possessions did you think was left in that game? I would make the coach explain it to me. And you know how I can get sometimes in these press conferences where I don't let up? That's what I would have been saying. And I don't care if they had scheduled the press conference for 3 o'clock the day after the AFC Championship game. You get an extra hour of Caroline because I'm going to that press conference, and I don't care if I have to do the show from my car that day out in the parking lot. We'll figure it out one way or another, but I'll be at that press conference. And I will say to that coach, I will just, again, walk me through it. Walk me through the entire thought process of not kicking that field goal to go up 3 possessions. well, we've decided this is how we're going to play all year. What does that mean? Because if you score a touchdown, it's still a 3-possession game. So are those 4 points that you might get worth not taking the 3 points that are right there? And I would call for that coach to be fired. Again, Brian Callahan, nobody gets in trouble on this show for something that they didn't do. And I don't think Brian Callahan's stupid. So I don't think his ass out of here. Because I don't want the coach of the Titans to be so stupid that it cost the Titans a Super Bowl. I've been to 1 Super Bowl in my life, so I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is for the Titans to get there. And if their coach just screws it up by being stupid and arrogant, I will not be able to handle it. That is the one thing where I know Kaharski he's like an uncontrollable, emotional fan. And for the most part, I think that I kind of, I get carried away, but I don't think that I fly off the handle. That will be the one thing that'll do it to me. That will do it. What happened yesterday, because that was so inexcusable, and too many people are excusing it. And then I also think about it like this, which people are, saying oh yeah, you're crazy to think they should fire Dan Campbell. I'm I'm sorry, but there need to be consequences for those kind of screw ups on that kind of stage. I keep going back to Grady Little, and most of you probably don't even know who that is. Grady Little was the manager of the Boston Red Sox. They won 92 games his first year. They won 95 games his second year. They're the wild card in the American League. They overcame an 0-2 deficit in the ALDS against the Oakland A's. They get to Game 7 against the Yankees. Pedro Martinez on the road, and he leaves him in there. They had no bullpen that year, no closer. And he left Martinez in the game because Martinez said he could do it. Maybe the best pitcher in baseball at the time. He deferred to him. He left him in there. The Yankees mounted a comeback. The curse of the Bambino lives on. Aaron Boone hits the home run, and they fired him. By all accounts, Grady Little was a good manager. But he made one mistake at the most crucial moment of the year, and they fired him. And they won the World Series the next year. And I don't understand why Dan Campbell is allowed to get this massive pass that Grady Little didn't get, that Doug Collins didn't get. You screw up in the big moment. If you lose the confidence of everybody who has just a little bit of competence, if you lose everybody's confidence, you should be fired. I don't understand why all of a sudden he changed the culture there, Jared. And so now they're going to go back to the Matt Patricia days because I fired him and elevated a guy who's already going to be a head coach anyways, who's probably smarter than him? I don't think so. And if Dan Campbell were, if Dan Campbell were as accomplished as, say, Zach Taylor, then I could probably let that one screw up slide with, just some serious anger and everything else. But Dan Campbell is a dope. He is a dope. The rah-rah stuff that got Detroit, that'll get Detroit to this point. But it will never get them further. And so in Nashville, we aren't entitled to much when it comes to football. And the people of Detroit are entitled to probably even less. But if Brian Callahan did what Dan Campbell did yesterday, I don't even know if I'd be able to function at 2 o'clock the next day. That's how mad I'd be. Vrabel made one incredibly stupid decision in a playoff game. It was against Baltimore when he decided to punt it from his own 42 late in the fourth quarter. But this is next level stupid. This is, oof. And I don't know if I can handle that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones on this. Plus, the one thing last week that I'm a little worried about when it comes to doing stupid stuff, I'll explain. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5-1063 The Game.
How much of this collapse are you putting on Dan Campbell and the coaching?
Yeah, very little. Let's be clear, though. This is a disastrous collapse for Detroit. To be up 14-0, to be up 24-7, and to lose in that way, disaster. I put very little on Dan Campbell. Everyone's talking about kicking field goals and whatnot. 4th and 2, they throw the ball to Josh Reynolds. He drops it. Then we come back, and then there's going to be a drop on 3rd down by Josh Reynolds in the 3rd quarter. And then there's the fumble by Gibbs in the 3rd quarter. All led to 17 points. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to those 2 drops. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to that Gibbs fumble.
You got a 24-7 lead at halftime. You do not have an excuse to lose that game and to get blitzed in the 3rd quarter the way that you did. I mean, not only was the game tied, the game was tied by the end of the 3rd quarter. Tied by the end of the 3rd quarter. And ultimately, you ended up scoring 27 unanswered points before you put up something. I'm sorry. I got to look at the coach there, and I got to say, yo, man, this was not your shining moment.
I remember when I was in Denver and being one of the leaders, every time we left the locker room during a playoff game, I would always tell the guys, don't you be the one. Don't you be the one that get a penalty that cost us. Don't you be the one that fumbled the football that cost us. Coach, don't you be the one to try to be the smartest man that ever played to coach the game. Take those points.
That was First Take this morning, of course, Orlovsky. Yeah, that massive collapse had nothing to do with coaching. The fact that as soon as Campbell decided to go for it on 4th down and didn't get it, the entire team melted down. The entire team that is the extension of him had nothing to do with coaching. At that point, then what does the coach do? Because on every play, they don't teach the guys drop the ball. They don't teach the guys to fumble the ball. They don't do any of that. They teach them to block, and they teach them to run to the open spot, and they teach them to catch it, and they teach them to. So then what does the coach do? I don't know. Now, there's one thing I don't like about this, which is the analytics community. Because the analytics community thinks Dan Campbell's a genius. And I don't think Dan Campbell is Mr. Analytics, by the way. I think Dan Campbell is what Vrabel was for about the first 6 weeks that he was here, which is, we're going to go for it. And then they went for it in London, and it blew up in his face, and I think he stopped doing that. And he realized, maybe the fake punts with Brett Kern isn't the way to go. I could be wrong. But, whatever. I think at some point, he realized, I need to coach this thing like a grown-up. But then everybody in analytics says that Dan Campbell, everything he's doing is right. And I hate that. Because everybody could feel it. You could feel the second the momentum shifted. You could feel the difference between a 3-possession lead and a 2-possession lead. And yet there was probably somebody over the headset that said, Coach, the analytics say that this gives us a 83% chance and that gives us an 81% chance. So call's yours, Coach. And that there are probably people in the Detroit office that are like, you know what? Coach actually did the right thing. All these other people, they don't know. And that worries me because one of the knocks on Vrabel was that Vrabel never did anything with analytics, which probably isn't true. But there is a sentiment now that Vrabel was Mr. Anti-Analytics. And since Vrabel did take a shot at analytics the last week he was the coach, I'm sure he wasn't 100% pro-analytics. But he wouldn't have blown that game the way that Dan Campbell did. Now enter in Brian Callahan, a coach who is a smart guy and, probably analytics are. I went back and I listened to his answer on analytics last week, and I felt when he answered it, I felt like, okay, this guy, there's room for analytics. But now I'm a little worried that he might be somewhat dictated by analytics, and I don't like that. This is what Brian Callahan said last week when he was asked about analytics.
Analytics, I think that it's a term that's a broad stroke term, but there's a lot of details that go into it, a lot of different ways it fits. At the end of the day, you're using hard, concrete data to help inform decision making, and that's great. The more smart people, the more information that you're given, the better decisions you can make. And so that's always going to be a part moving forward. I believe in that information. I believe in that data. And again, the game management part, the statistical analysis, all those things play a huge role in how we're going to build our organization, and they're important and it matters. So I believe in it.
How much, though, do you believe in it? Because if you believe in it, that it supersedes every other sign of logic, we're going to have problems. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If he's doing what Dan Campbell was doing yesterday, we're going to have problems. If he blows a game the way Dan Campbell blew it, and I don't mind the coaches that go for two, to win the game right then. It depends on, your defense and them in overtime and everything else. But I didn't have a problem when he went for two against Dallas. I did when he went for two from the 7-yard line. Now I got a problem. So if Brian Callahan, now I assume Brian Callahan's bosses really wanted to hear Brian Callahan talk about analytics, because that was, again, a big sticking point with Vrabel, was that he didn't embrace analytics. So I'm the new guy here, so let me talk that I care about analytics. That's fine. If Brian Callahan is going to use analytics in the decision-making, that's fine. If Brian Callahan is going to go for it like it's the wild, wild west because of analytics, we're going to have problems. Because you've got to feel the game. That being said, though, I've watched a decent amount of Bengals games over the last couple of years because they've been good, and I love Joe Burrow, and I can't ever remember thinking that they were just ridiculously incompetent with their decisions to go for it or not to go for it, the way Brandon Staley was acting with the Chargers or yesterday with Coach Moron out there in Detroit. 615-737-1025. Gerard has been waiting patiently and is up next here on our program. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What's up, Gerard?
Hey, man, what's up? Hey, I totally agree with you, man. That was moronic, and you can lose your job over that in the heat of the moment like that. But your question you asked was, what if that happened here in Tennessee? Well, it kind of did, man. Remember the Bengals game in the playoffs? First of all, we go to kick an extra point. They jump off sides. We decide to get smart. We go for two. We get stopped. Takes the wind out of the sails. Then go back to the first play of the game. We want to run a one-route pattern to a play fake to a guy named Derrick Henry that we should have given the ball to because he's been sitting out for 6 weeks, so we throw a pick. And then we have Foreman who gets the hot hand, and then we give it back to Henry. So to me, that it wasn't as bad as the meltdown yesterday, but man, that right there was pretty bad here in Nashville, that game against the Bengals. I still say that he lost that game against the Bengals. It sticks with me. And then he should have been fired after the Colts game this year.
Do you think he lost this game more than Tannehill lost that game?
Yeah, I do, because here's the thing. That first play of the game, that play scripted for 10 days. We had a week off. So we knew we were running. We had 10 days to pick a play. 10 days. And that's the play we run. So, I mean, I think Tannehill was at fault. But come on, man, just like you just said, Campbell, by his play call, he took the wind out of his sails. He's the guy, right? So
let me tell you this, Gerard, this is a good call. I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I appreciate it. I turned around at my seat after Tannehill threw the first interception because Tannehill had a bad season and then had a good game. That last game on the road at Houston might have been his best game since week 2 of the 2021 season. And I was like, this could be something to build on, because if they can get that Tannehill, they might win the Super Bowl. And on the first interception, I turned around and kicked the chair because I knew that we were going to be getting the bad Ryan Tannehill that day. And the second point about that game was I was actually surprised that Mike Vrabel brought back Todd Downing after that 2021 season when Tannehill didn't play well after that game, because I thought somebody had to be the sacrificial lamb for what happened. And I thought it was going to be Downing. That was the easy guy to pin it on, is fire him, bring in a new guy to be the offensive coordinator and go from there. But he didn't. And so I blame Vrabel for those things. I don't think Vrabel coached a great game against the Bengals. Ultimately, I put the blame on Tannehill and Downing to a certain extent. But you can make that argument. It wasn't as bad as what Dan Campbell did yesterday, though. I mean, I haven't seen that kind of stupid. I can't even think off the top of my head the last time I saw that kind of stupid, where I just couldn't believe it. And for what it cost that entire city with that stupidity, I'm guessing I'm going to think Pete Carroll at the end of that Patriots Super Bowl. Like, that might be the level of dumb that I feel. But even more so because Pete had just won the Super Bowl last year, whereas Detroit, they've never won anything ever. They've never been to a Super Bowl. 615-737-1025, more of your phones. Plus, we do have some updates, some nuggets on the Titans coaching staff discussion search. We'll get to that. Happy Super Bowl from FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets on Super Sunday. Again, I don't know how any of you could ever bet against Patrick Mahomes after the way that he has played in these playoffs and the past playoffs and everything else. So I'm sorry, I'm not a Brock Purdy guy. I, at least right now, am siding significantly with Mahomes. FanDuel has many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/JGM to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/JGM and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 and over in present Tennessee. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
The Titans coaching staff, actually, just catch me up, Paul. I know that you reported about, Tim Kelly, which is no surprise. Charles London, I thought maybe there was a chance that Charles London might be worked into retention here with the Titans, but that
Jonathan
is
Jones
not the case.
Of CBS had Charles London. I confirmed it. Stretch gone, which is another obvious one, is closely
He'll be
tied
with Vrabel.
to Mike Vrabel as anybody. Others are out, just difficult to get. I can say, I think they made the vast majority of these calls on Friday. Frank Perrano, the strength and conditioning coach, is not one of them. And it's my understanding that some of these staff members are having meetings with Callahan this week. So those
Which makes sense. That's the normal timeline.
Yeah, those amount to some level of interview for existing staff, for Callahan to get a better feel for those guys and see if he'd be interested in keeping them on his new staff, depending again on what kind of candidates he has for those positions himself.
Hey, that was PK this morning with a little rundown about the Titans coaching staff as it's coming together, what have you. Got a couple of thoughts, then we'll get to your phones. First off, Tim Kelly and Charles London out. Well, duh. I mean, the amount of people that were surprised that Tim Kelly, who doesn't even run the same system as Brian Callahan, they were surprised. This guy been coaching offense his whole life. He's gonna bring in his own staff. So Tim Kelly being fired is not a surprise. Tim Kelly probably knew when Vrabel got fired that he was getting fired. So that's, not a surprise. The amount of people that were either shocked or saddened or disappointed that the Titans didn't keep Charles London, like even Joe in that cut where he was like, I thought maybe Charles London was going to have a shot. Based on what? Like, you hired the guru coach. Now go let him guru. Guess who the offensive coordinator of this team's going to be? Brian Callahan. Guess who's going to be the quarterback coach for this team? For Will Levis specifically. Brian Callahan. Now everybody else that they get around him will support in that process, and they'll have a quarterback coach, and they'll have an offensive coordinator, but all of this is Brian Callahan. So why would Brian Callahan keep the people that are already there doing the job that he's going to be doing? You're hiring Brian Callahan for him to be Will Levis's quarterback coach. Why would he keep a Vrabel guy? Plus, our problem with Vrabel's coaching staff was that it sucked anyways. So why would we be, oh my God, he fired Charles London? You guys don't even know what Charles London does. I don't even know what Charles London does. Because we're not in that building. So no, Brian Callahan is not going to be keeping offensive coaches, specifically ones around the quarterback, which that is going to be his project, is to make, you see those quarterbacks that are really, really good this weekend? It's his job to make that guy that good, if he can. Or find somebody else who can be that good. That's his job. Why would he keep the guys that are already here? Again, you heard that John Stryker, a.k.a. Stretch, Vrabel's secretary, he's out. I mean, you don't keep that guy around. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that that's even news. I assumed that when Vrabel got fired, and I must have assumed poorly, but I assumed that when Vrabel got fired, that his right-hand man was going to be fired too. Tony Dews, the running backs coach, who then was tight ends coach last year, he goes to the Jets. Good for him. Nick Holes and Eric Studesville have been interviewed for the offensive coordinator position. Now, remember this. The Rooney Rule does apply to coordinators. Now, it's different than it is for head coaches. But the Titans are going to have to interview multiple candidates for offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator is different than offensive coordinator because I expect Brian Callahan to hire one guy who's going to be in charge of the defense, and then offensive coordinator will just be an extension of him. So I'm not too worried about that. Apparently, Brian Callahan won't be at the Senior Bowl, or it is doubtful, I was told today, that Brian Callahan will be at the Senior Bowl, but I'm fine with that because what they really need to do is they need to get that board set at the Combine, and so let him handle the coaching staff here, and then get that board set for the combine, and then really let Brian Callahan, sink his teeth into that at the combine and the film and the meetings and everything else. Not a huge fan of him not being at the Senior Bowl just because, well, I just trust him more than I trust the GM. So I want Callahan as invested in these prospects as he can be, but I don't have a problem with it. It should be fine. There was a little nugget that I just want to touch on right before I get to the phones. But I don't know if you guys saw this. Dave Lapham, who is on the Bengals radio broadcasts, he was on WLW, which is like the station in Cincinnati. And he said last week that Zach Taylor was contemplating giving Brian Callahan the play calling for next year. So had Brian Callahan stayed and not gotten a head coaching job, Zach Taylor felt comfortable enough to at least tell people that he was contemplating giving the play calling to Brian Callahan. Now that Brian Callahan has gotten a head coaching job and Dan Pitcher, the quarterback's coach, has become the OC, Zach Taylor's going to keep the play calling. But the fact that he was willing to give Callahan the play calling tells me two things. One, he really wanted to do right by Brian Callahan. But two, that he was comfortable enough for all these people that are like, but Jared, he's never called plays. Well, Zach Taylor was comfortable enough to stick his job and Joe Burrow's current career on Brian Callahan doing it. So that's not nothing. Like, that is at least a little important to me. 615-737-1025. Jaden has been waiting patiently and is up next on Dan Campbell. Thank you for calling and waiting. What's up, Jaden?
Hey, Jared. So I know you're on a new segment and whatnot, but I just wanted to touch on this. I 100% disagree with your take on fire the coach. He's incompetent, blah, 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 blah. I mean, you can't put all the blame on Dan Campbell. You got to realize Josh Reynolds had two crucial drops. The Lions defense was able to hold San Francisco to 7 points in the first half, and then they just did terrible in the second half. I mean, what happened there? You can't put all the blame on the coach.
So you don't think that total meltdown, like the entire game melted down after that point, right? Like, they gave up a field goal on San Francisco's first drive of the second half, and then Detroit moved the ball down the field, and from that point forward, it was a complete and total meltdown, right?
It did not go well for them, yes.
And you don't think that the momentum of the game had anything to do with why Detroit melted down?
I mean, you got a point there, but I don't know how you put all the blame on Dan Campbell.
Well, somebody is the head coach, right? Like, do we not blame Dan Campbell for running the football at the end of the game when they had 3 timeouts, and in order to avoid kicking an onside kick, they had to keep 3 timeouts?
Yeah, where's all the Ben Johnson love today for that?
Well, I say this, though. Who's got a headset and is the head coach?
Well, he can overrule, sure.
I can promise you that it is discussed on the headset. If he's going to call a run, it's discussed. Like, Greg Olsen said it right there on the broadcast while it happened about, hey, if we run here, we don't get it. Dan Campbell's got a headset on. And Dan Campbell does make the final decisions, I think, unless he's just a cheerleader and not a coach. And I don't think he's just a cheerleader. See, this is my problem, is that every time somebody gets a head coaching job, it's always, we're going to coach the best. We're going to work the hardest. We're going to, and it's like, that's our leader. And then the entire team melts down. And we're not allowed to blame him for it. That doesn't make any sense. To me, Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't fumble the ball like that if it's not an avalanche of momentum that is just riding all over the entire Lions team. The way I looked at that game, especially as far as the momentum was concerned, was when they didn't get it on fourth down. I'll give you the fourth down, Josh Reynolds dropped it. If Josh Reynolds catches the ball, then the meltdown probably doesn't happen right then and there. I don't know what would have happened on that drive. There is no guarantee that if they had converted that fourth down that they would have put the ball in the end zone. They could have still ended up kicking a field goal. I still think if they had kicked that field goal, they would have won the game. But, again, Josh Reynolds dropped it. It was avoidable and would have been avoided by kicking the field goal. Well, once they didn't get it, I'm sitting there watching the game with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. A game that Detroit has dominated. A game that, again, sitting on my couch, I could feel the pressure on Purdy and San Francisco. And I thought, San Francisco is one play away from making this a ball game. 17 points at halftime. That's not a ball game anymore. That's what Green Bay was doing to Dallas. Like a 17-point lead at halftime. That is not a ball game. And, of course, San Francisco's going to go in, and they're going to say, we're going to go out, and we're going to fight in the second half, and we're going to give it everything we've got. But deep down in, the back of their minds, they're like, yeah, we blew this one. Oh, crap. But then, when it's 14, you're one play away. Titans were the same way in that 14-point game against Miami where they came back, and it was a throw over the middle where Levis hit DeAndre for 60 yards down the field. And now you're in business because now you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. If it's 17, Fox goes to commercial, they kick the ball off, Brock Purdy runs back out there, everybody in the stadium is feeling the impending doom that is coming with this tiny little quarterback out there who has shown them nothing today. And they are thinking, oh boy, we're in trouble. Oh no, oh no, oh no. And then maybe Purdy rushes himself or the defense up by 17 can pin their ears back and come after the quarterback or whatever. At that point, there's probably 4 more possessions for San Francisco. You're up 3. You get 1 stop or 1 score or a combination of the two, and the game is probably over. Over. And you're in the Super Bowl. But when they didn't get it, it became a 14-point game. And I said San Francisco is a 1 play from turning this game upside down. And they hit it on the ball to Ayuk that bounced off Kendall Vildor's face mask. That was the play. That was the play they had to have that put them back in the game. And when I saw that, I thought, oh no, Detroit's in trouble. It's still a 14-point game, but at that point, San Francisco's team, San Francisco's crowd, everybody in America can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And the Lions, who as part of their identity is how do we screw this up, they see it too. Dan Campbell got greedy. Can't get greedy doing that. And so when it's, oh, yeah, it's so bad, it's so this, it's so, oh, God, it's, oh, no. Eric in Clarksville says, where was all this? It's the coach's fault during the Titan season. Did you listen to this show? Can't blame this show for not blaming the coach. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company. Tell you about White Bison. White Bison is my coffee shop. Stay warm and cozy with their new honey-based drinks. Cinnamon Bee Hive Latte, iced honey nut macchiato, vanilla rooibos tea latte. White Bison, White Bison twice daily. They're the best. Your local coffee shop with food featuring fresh-made premium breakfast, lunch, and snack options. Download the app and order ahead. When you download the Twice Daily app and the White Bison app, you can enroll in the rewards program. When you place orders on the go, anytime you can automatically earn on every purchase. Download the app and order ahead. Earn rewards and get 1 free coffee every time you buy 7. Part of White Bison's rewards. Buy 7, get 1 free. That's White Bison and Twice Daily. Fresh all day. Predators tonight. Predators game day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. TJ Anderson, get your house seen, heard, and sold. Predators tonight on the road at the Canadian Tire Centra, taking on the Ottawa Senators. They are 18-25-2, bad for 38 points. Predators 26-21 and 153 points. Predators need to win tonight because they are officially out of the Western Conference playoffs right now. St. Louis has a point up and a game in hand. Seattle 1 point back, and Arizona 4 points back with a game in hand. So it's not looking good. And I'd be worried about the, trade deadline. Maybe they got to think about something with the goalie. But tonight, we shall see. Max has the pregame show. The call tonight, 6 o'clock, right here, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Pregame's next. We'll see you tomorrow at 2.